the people who speak about this civilization, this country, my country, this continent, who speak about it only in terms of grudge, of vengeance, of vendetta, never in the spirit of forgiveness or love or gratitude. I've always said this about my own views about what some people call nationalism or patriotism. Somebody said to me some years ago, you know, are you patriotic? And I said, I find it's a strange question to be asked. I said, I don't really know. I mean, I said, I just feel grateful, really, about where I'm from. And I would like anyone who wants to be part of it to share in that gratitude. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why I'm so amazed that the other tone has become the normal tone. The thing of, I haven't been given enough. Other people have kept stuff from me. I'm of this minority, whether it's sexual, racial, whatever, and I'm owed something by somebody else. Powerful people are holding me down. If I could just squeeze them and then drink whatever it is that's produced when you squeeze them, we could all kind of come out exactly the same. Screw that. It's a hideous idea that's being pushed onto this, I think, particularly the younger generation on this. But as I say, it starts in some way with this fundamental thing: what is the attitude you have to the society and the culture which you're from? Is it, broadly speaking, one of this place has been a place of oppression, of racism, of sexism, of inequality, and on and on and on, compared to what? You never get told, but is it that, or is it, broadly speaking, to say, this has been an extraordinary ride so far, and I'd like to see it continue. I know which one I feel, but I know which one is being taught to a new generation as well. Anyhow, with that I hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those introductory remarks. I thought we'd try and divide up the different maladies so we don't just end up with a big sort of mixed bowl of frustrations, but we try to pick them up one after one. And I thought I'd like to go back to you, Douglas, about what you said, about the sort of the modern pessimism part, because I think that's intriguing. You warned against optimism. Why?
I warned against optimism. Yes, well, I'm against optimism as an attitude, which it usually is. If you ever have to discuss anything of consequence with a politician, and you have a truth, and they don't, which does happen, you will always find the politician will do the following move on you. They'll say, I guess I'm just more optimistic than Douglas. It's a constant trick, this one. Well, I guess I'm just more optimistic than you. Yeah. As if the most optimistic person in any situation wins. I mean, there's all sorts of times it's very unwise to be optimistic. Very unwise to be standing at a bus stop when the bus has not come along for hours and hours and hours. It's very unwise to be optimistic that it will at some point quite soon, so stay there another day. It's a strange thing that's built into almost all discussion, this. Pessimism, Roger Scruton, the great philosopher from the UK, wrote a book some years ago called The Uses of Pessimism. And it's a very, very interesting book. And I have to say that as a default position, to be pessimistic also has its downsides, also is unwise in situations. So just all of these attitudes, in a way, we have to go beyond just, if the facts look good, you'll be positive about it. If they look bad, don't be. Address them. And as I say, I'm amazed by the attitude of politics and of indeed of philosophy as well. I think there are all sorts of things which it's worth being pessimistic about in order, among other things, to warn yourself and to warn others. I mentioned earlier, I mean, I think that carrying out great experiments on a society and making the stakes this high is an unwise thing and would have been restrained if people had been more pessimistic. I mentioned this on the radio program earlier, that to do some of the things that we've done in recent decades, and to say, well, if it will come out right. It has to come out right. It must come out right. Well, everything has the other opportunity as well. What if it goes wrong? What if this great experiment fails? What then? As I say, you've done an enormous experiment, the most lethal experiment imaginable, and it might not work. I think that a good dose of pessimism might have helped earlier on this. This is very complex stuff. It's not a science. Nobody knows how to do it. I've noticed this for years in an area I've written about a lot and studied a lot, the so-called radicalization, which is one of the ways that people make a science out of something that isn't a science. There's always 7 steps to de-radicalization, 8 steps to radicalization, 9 ways to make it up. The 3 Ps, the 4 Rs, they always come up with things like this. Nobody knows. It's not a science. It's a social science. Maybe. Maybe. Not a science. And it's always presented as if it is. And as I say, I think maybe not pessimism, deep, deep skepticism about some of the things that have been going on, I think is a very wise attitude. And by the way, also conceding when pessimists are wrong. I mean, it's not like, again, this is a thing to do with the attitude. It's not like one wants to be pessimistic because it's just much more fun. In fact, I had an example recently, slight divergence, but if I may give an example of this, it's been on my mind recently. I haven't written about it yet, but I'm planning to. A very, very interesting thing happened. We're about to come up to the 30th anniversary of the fatwa issued against Salman Rushdie for writing the Satanic Verses, which in my country, at any rate, was a very, very important moment, and I think was globally. And something else has happened of much, much less import recently, but which struck me very deeply when it occurred. And pardon me going from the sublime to the possibly ridiculous, but not all of you will be familiar with the work of a pop band called One Direction. I mean, obviously you all know the early work, but this is a pop band. They're very amiable 5 young guys who won a television show in the UK. I'll make it short. They run a television show in the UK, and they formed a pop band, and they've millions and millions of records, fans all around the world. And it was a nice representation of on Britain. One, nice-looking young guys, and one of them was Irish, and one of them was of Pakistani Muslim descent. It's called Zayn Malik. And I mention this because some years ago he was in Istanbul, and he sent out a tweet about, there's only one God, Allah, and so on. I remember noticing at the time, I thought, well, that's interesting. A few weeks ago, he gave an interview, this young guy, to a magazine somewhere, and they asked him about his religion, and he said, I don't consider myself a Muslim anymore, I'm not religious anymore. And the reason I mention this is just because nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was the dog that didn't bark in the Sherlock Holmes story. And I found that absolutely fascinating. So, and the reason I mention this is because if you're very pessimistic about integration and so on, like I, to some extent, am, that's the sort of thing you wouldn't expect to happen. You would expect front-page stories, Imam issues death sentence on Zayn Malik of One Direction for leaving Islam. Zayn Malik chased into hiding. The point is, I'm saying, is that there's stuff like that going on which is very, very hard to quantify. And I'm not saying by any means I think the solution to integration, or what I write about in my last book, is Zayn Malik. Very important that you don't get that as a takeaway. But that isn't nothing, because that means that within a generation, it may have become, not completely safe, but a lot safer for actual freedom to move within religions and out of religions might be happening. So I give this somewhat long-winded and esoteric example, just to make that point, that when evidence comes up that may be against something else, it's nevertheless very, very well worth paying attention to it.
Thank you.